Dave Crossman is a managing director of Black Hills Products in Northumberland, a company who provides engineered solutions to the utilities and energy sectors. Having started the business nearly 6 years ago, I thought this would be the perfect time to talk about the highs and lows of running and growing an engineering business in perhaps one of the most up and down periods of time we've ever had. This was a great insight into how a family-run business concentrates on doing what is right for their staff and their clients. We dig into how crucial it is to value your people and look after them in a world where retention and recruitment has never been harder to navigate. This is a great episode about building a business and concentrating on a positive, inclusive culture. I hope you enjoy. So a warm welcome to Dave Crossman, is the MD of Black Hills Products in Bedlington, Dave, is that right? Northumberland?
Yeah, it's Bedlington. It's actually Sleepburn, kind of nearer Camas.
Nice.
So we get the lovely sea fret when it comes in.
Absolutely, yeah. So we're seeing, so we get a bit ourselves too. So we're looking forward to talking about the journey, starting up, building the business, that type of stuff. So really excited. But before we do that, normal question: what does it mean to you to be a leader?
I've only really been. I've had another business before, and I suppose in that I was a leader, even though I didn't quite realise I was. I think that for me, the thing with being a leader is that you've got to be respected and show respect to your employees. And at the same time, you've got to take responsibility as that leader for anything which doesn't go quite to plan. But when things do go quite to plan, everybody takes credit. Now, I think if you're the opposite way on, that's when it probably doesn't work. And we've got a fairly small team here, but everyone seems to see me as a leader, despite the fact for many years I didn't think I was. But I think that's probably because we've created quite an inclusive sort of culture here. And we chat through the majority of business opportunities, decisions with sort of key personnel. Maybe the guys who aren't directly involved with that, we still chat through other stuff. And I think just being part of that inclusivity makes people feel more belonging.
Yeah.
And that's what a leader does, is it invigorates and motivates people.
Yeah, I think that's a brilliant way to describe it. And I the more people I speak to on here, the more I can see that management has evolved over the years and changed, where I think it's less dictatorship now and more, like you say, much more inclusive. And I think there's a lot more respect there mutually, I would say. You know, I
would have said so.
Yeah.
I think the mistake some people make perhaps is trying to treat everybody the same.
Yeah.
In reality, some people will respond better to a different management style, and you've got to identify that within the person as to what it is that they want out of it, and how you can then get the best out of that employee, just purely by making them feel the same. I mean, there's a thing which I've followed for years called the love languages. Now, why it talks about relationships, it's also very pertinent to staff, because you've got to understand how they feel valued. And obviously the personal touch thing's a bit dodgy these days. But the sort of motivation, the words of affirmation, even the little gifts can be really quite beneficial. It doesn't have to be much, just, oh, while I was out, I thought this.
Yeah.
And there's a couple of guys here into golf. So you buy them a couple of golf balls and they're over the moon.
Yeah.
They really are, because most of the time they've scavenged their golf balls from the side of the course.
Yeah, it is. I love that. It's because it just shows that you're thinking about them, and it shows they're important, which is...
Yes.
And I've said this, I said this in a post recently, I think even the newer generation coming through, they need to feel they've got a voice, and they need to feel important. They need to be important and be a part of the team. And I think that's where businesses is now starting to evolve and change. And you're probably not seeing as bigger teams as you had now. People are getting probably more out of less, but working closer with them, which obviously you've done yourself.
I think part of the problem was that years ago, people didn't view everybody within the business as being important. They only viewed the ones that actually brought the physical cash in.
Yeah.
But whether you're at the top of the tree or you're starting off, you're still an integral part of that machine. And one of the things that I love to say is, and I don't know if you're allowed to swear in here, so I'll try and keep it polite.
Oh, yeah, fine.
In a world without sort of sanitation engineers, it's literally a world full of shit. Yeah. You can't do your job if they don't do theirs. And there was an adage years ago about a guy who worked on the in NASA, and he was a cleaner, and somebody said, "What do you do?" "I send people to the moon." And without him there, you've just got masses of garbage everywhere. So every single person is an integral part of it. It's just identifying who's best to fit those roles.
Yeah, I love that. And you know what I find challenging, because I have sales staff and then back office staff and managerial staff. So I really resonate with that. And it's almost a balance of making sure, I think your sales staff or the people, whoever is in the business, they're at the front, they always have the limelight. It's making sure the people who are at the back, but making sure they can do their job, they also have the kudos. It's difficult, isn't it?
Yes.
There's my ops manager, I've called her N'Golo Kante sometimes, because she's an integral part of the team, and the strikers couldn't do what they could do without them. But it's not always seen publicly. It's a constant challenge as a manager to try and make sure everyone's involved, isn't it? Cool.
Yeah, it is, and a constant challenge is also keeping people involved and making them feel validated and that their input is valuable. Which, if you get the right staff, it always is. Yeah. It's when you don't get the right staff and you start going, well, I don't think I'm going to have to involve them because they're a bit of a pain.
Yeah.
But we kind of need to. And then you've got to ask the question of, if they're like that, is it because they're going to be like that regardless, or is it because you haven't challenged them properly?
Yeah.
And certainly in my very younger days, I got an apprenticeship at a place in Blythe called Value Security Systems. And it didn't quite work out the way I wanted to. And I know there was various sort of roles within that I was given, and I wasn't valued. And I wasn't valued because I didn't put my effort in. And I didn't put the effort in because it was boring.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I wasn't challenged. I was thinking, well, I can do this, I stand on my head, so I'll just do the bare minimum. And I didn't get the point of going, yeah, I can really get my teeth into this until probably later on in my employment there. When I got my teeth into something and I proved it, and the guy who I was then working for went, "Blooming heck, mate, I was told you were a waster." Yeah. And I'm like, nobody's found the right job for me to get my teeth into and challenges. And until you get that point, you've got to ask the question then is that the staff member's problem, or is it the management's problem? And to me, it's the management who haven't found the right way to engage with that employee.
Yeah, it's purpose, isn't it, as well? I think, again, more people coming through now are wanting to have this purpose, so their job is part of something, big, but it's just part of something which makes a difference. And what you're talking about there is you probably didn't see the point in your job because you didn't see what the end result was, and you weren't valued, and that was transpired into not being happy in your job until you found that purpose.
Yeah, probably was. I think it was once responsibility was put on me, I started going, right, okay, I'll take it seriously. Whereas before it was just a case of, oh, can you just sort that out? It was almost like a byproduct. I'll just give Dave this job just to get rid of him.
So, there's power. Yeah, I agree with that. There's massive powers in it, but giving people responsibility and seeing how they deal with it. And if they deal with it well, that's a telltale sign they probably want more than they've got right now.
Yeah.
Yeah. Love it. So look, let's take it right back, Dave. So, I guess leading to you building the business, obviously there's a lot in between with all that. So, getting into manufacturing, doing what you're doing. Did you know what you wanted to do growing up, or how did things sort of transpire?
I thought I wanted to be a police officer.
Yeah.
Yeah, my father was a police officer, my mother was.
Right.
And it was very much just a case of, I'll just follow the family tradition, it seems, and just do that. Yeah. But I'd always been really quite good at figuring things out, working with my hands. My grandfather was a methods engineer at Welling and Bedlington many, many moons ago. Yeah. And so I never actually knew him, but I always felt I had a connection to him because of the fact I was quite good at doing these things. Mm-hmm. And I tried many times to get in the police force, didn't get in. And I ended up going back to college and doing a basic engineering course, which is where I ended up sort of falling under the radar of Valio and getting off an apprenticeship there. Now, Valio in probably late 90s relocated across, I think, was it Yugoslavia then, or was it changed? But across that neck of the woods. Uh-huh. And I was in the position of, I'm going to have to find something else to do. And the guy I was working for at that point in time, which is the guy who sort of really challenged me and giving me a purpose, as you said, said, look, I'll give you a hand. I'll write your CV for you. And I went, okay, fair enough. That's pretty good because I'd heard of a job going in a place in Morpeth that made conveyor systems. And he wrote this for me, and he completely embellished what I could possibly do. And of course, I'd read this after and thought, well, is that right? And he says, yeah, put it in, you'll get something. I went, right, okay then. So I put it in, and I got an interview, and I thought, oh, bloody hell, I'm going to have to carry through on this, aren't I? So I went along the interview, and probably the wrong way to say this, but I bullshitted my way through it.
Yeah.
And I knew I had the potential,
Uh-huh.
and I knew I could do what I was saying I could do. I just didn't have the experience to do so. But I thought, I'm pretty sure I can learn quickly.
Yeah.
And they lapped it up. I thought it was great, and I got offered the job. And I mean, at that point in time, it was a double in wage, which was phenomenal.
Yeah.
And I got in there, and I knew some of the basics. I'd used CAD and stuff before, and I started getting given projects, and I'm thinking, okay, let's just make this up and see where it goes. I had a chat with some other guys, and I was probably there 3-4 years, and within 3 years, I was starting to get requested as the preferred engineer for some of the clients. And at that point in time, I started to get a bit, I suppose, disheartened because I got the preferred engineer status because when I designed something, it didn't really fail. It didn't have many sort of snags, whereas a lot of people were used to a month of snagging. But I'm not degree qualified. I was in a room with a lot of people that were.
Mm-hmm.
I was getting paid a lot less than they were because I didn't have those credentials.
Mm-hmm.
And at the same time, I was also handling projects to the same amount, if not sometimes higher than those people. And I was getting disheartened because I'm thinking, well, unless I go to university here, which I didn't really want to do,
yeah,
I've got no real chance of progression. And it was a small family business. So even within the hierarchical structure of moving up, that was going to be months down the line because the guy wasn't very old and moved with my boss unless he moved somewhere else. And at that point in time, I maybe foolishly, but they make lots of choices in life, and that's where you get to, and that's how we are today. I bought this really old Land Rover, because again, I like fixing things. And when I was back on the CAD, I wasn't really getting involved in the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
And I got sick of putting it in somewhere and saying, "Can you do this work?" And they would have to say, "Well, I don't know how to do that," or they would give us something back, and that's not what I wanted.
Mm-hmm.
So I decided, right, this is me. I'm going to quit. I'm going to start my own Land Rover repair business. Obviously, no credentials again, no mechanic training as such. Just I knew I had a really good grasp of engineering, and I thought at the end of the day, mechanic, it's engineering.
Yep.
So I started a business called Cheviot 4x4, which was based on Tyne Tunnel, in 2003, and that I ran that all the way through till 2018 with my father. When eventually I got to a point where I loved fixing the cars. I didn't like so much dealing with the public. I couldn't get them because a lot of the time the bills were high. Yeah. As much as I kept them informed, it was just it wasn't my thing. I wanted to be involved in the engineering side of it.
Yep.
Now I always kept the engineering side going alongside it because I also designed our own range of off-road equipment. And in 2008, obviously bank crash and all that sort of stuff. We wound back the manufacturing, thinking, Christ, where do we go with this? We weathered the storm, and it got to sort of 2010, 2011, and I think, well, do we roll this stuff back out there? But it was a hard slog trying to sell one item to somebody who took an hour to decide.
Yeah.
So we happened to be in the right place at the right time. I spoke to one of the distributors that we were buying off and said, do you not fancy selling some stuff? If we make it, do you want to sell it? And as it happens, they were about to launch a fairly global brand. So we got in at the start, and we designed an awful lot of other products, and we started making it literally in the back of the garage. We've got the guys next door to bend all the metal. We welded it together, and it was a big combination. And it was a big mess when you think about it, because we had the garage side in one area, we had the fabrication side in another area, we had somewhere else to put the pallets, but the unit was only 3,000 square foot. So where do you go with that?
Yeah.
Now, obviously, the garage went down a certain route, and the thing that killed the garage was the works on the A19 for the Silverlink roundabout. It strangleholded the business in it, and I just got to a point of saying, we're not doing this anymore. Yeah. My dad was wanting to retire. I wanted to continue with the metal side of it because that's what I really enjoyed. We said, right, we'll voluntarily liquidate that business. because it got to the point as well where the money wasn't coming in, which is a big issue.
Yeah.
So in 2018, I officially sort of launched Black Hills Products Limited. It was beforehand, it was a solo venture. And we continued manufacturing this range of products for the Land Rover in aftermarket industry. And by this point in time, again, our products had got a really good reputation. The company had grown a lot that we were selling to. So it was really quite beneficial. And in honesty, I didn't know quite what I was going to do. I thought, I'll just keep riding this to see where it goes. And my mindset hadn't changed at that point in time. It was very much I just want to do this little bit in this little business. And because my dad had kind of ran that business and I'd been the tech guy, I thought, well, I'll just keep doing this and keep my head in the sand. And if it goes somewhere, it goes somewhere. Otherwise, I'll just ring my dad and say, can you come back and give us a hand again? And then obviously in 2020, it got to the point where everything drastically changed. Taps turned off from an income stream point of view. And you're then thinking, bloody hell, I've got a problem here. And I remember being told by our sole customer, keep yourself busy, but don't make anything that costs money. How the hell am I going to do that, mate? So, of course, I went back to tinkering on cars, didn't I? Mainly my cars, because I'd neglected them for years. And I'm thinking, this isn't what I want to do. There was a reason I got out of the car game. I'm not enjoying this. And as it happened, just before the first lockdown, we got a foot in the door with Northern Power Grid. And it was purely right place, right time. And they came to us about a month into lockdown and said, came to me, because it was me on my own, and said, can you make a load of these stuff? We've got some products here which need redesigning, but can you make some? Yeah. And also we've got a problem with this. Can you design something for that? Yeah, okay, mate. So all of a sudden, this, what was nothing, turned into a fairly constant tap at that point in time. And then everybody's sitting at home getting paid furlough, thinking, oh, now I'll fix that Land Rover. And then so the Land Rover aftermarket stuff tap turned on, but it didn't just turn on, it turned on at full whack. And I'm working 20-hour days. I'm absolutely sick of my life. My wife's at home, sitting in the sun, getting a tan, absolutely loving it. And I'm like, you're going to have to give us a hand here. How can I do it? Because what we did at that point in time, we didn't just manufacture the stuff. We took it right from concept to boxed. So we designed it, we manufactured it, we put it in the box, we put the stickers on the box, and then we just put it in the pallet and they collected it. So we were trying to juggle the Northern Power Grid stuff, and they were using it as an ideal point in time to get lots of work done, which they hadn't done for ages. Mainly stores based rather than sort of substation or anything like that. But very, very quickly, I got the point of going, Chris, I need a hand here. And my wife was coming in begrudgingly at that point when I needed her. And I ended up having to take somebody on, just part-time, to give us a hand. And that evolved again and again. And in September, I took on my first proper employee, which was this guy. Now, he's still here today. My wife actually joined us in October. She spent 4 or 5 years in teaching and decided to get out of it because, well, any teacher will tell you why they get out of it, but it's pretty common. And I said at a point in time, look, you're miserable. I'm miserable because you're miserable. Come and help us at work. I've got no idea what you're going to do, but just get out of where you are, because I don't want to go home at night because you're such a miserable sod. And she came in and looked at the place and went, Dave, this is an absolute shithole. Because obviously I'm involved in the making of it. I'm not involved. My head's not working from the point of I need to tidy this, I need to organise that. It was just a case of get this stuff out the door. So she's very organised. I'm not. I'm creative. I get lots of ideas. Whilst I can be organised in my own work, it looks like a bomb site, but I don't know where everything is. So she came in and went, right, okay, we need to do this, this, and this. Started growing the business from there. And in 21, we took a look at the business and went, where do we want to be here? Because it's great at the minute, but there's what's going to happen when everything starts sort of slowing down, as it will do, no doubt. And we were looking at the utility sector in particular because that was a new sector. It was quite interesting. We realised that an awful lot of the utilities companies were specifying that you needed to have ISO. And I'm like, yeah, I've heard of that, but I've got no idea what it is. So as it happens, my next door neighbour's daughter-in-law was an ISO consultant. So she came in and had a chat with us, and said, well, you can do this, you can do that, or you can do all three. But most people only do like three, being an integrated one, once they've done the first one. Right, okay, well, we cannot just do the whole lot together. Well, yeah, you can, but it's a lot of work. Like, yeah, just that's fine. Just get on with it. I'm not going to mess about it. We need all three in any case, because everyone's saying, oh, you've got 9,001, 14,000, 45,000. I went, yeah, just do it. Well, we lost the next 10 months of our life. Every weekend, because we hadn't all the processes we kind of had, but it was all in my head. And obviously ISO is quite sort of documentation heavy, so it was a case I had to get everything written down. And whilst she helped us, I got a massive shock how much work was involved, because of course you're trying to do this while running the business.
So
everything had to happen behind it. Now the major benefit was Lindsay, because she did the bulk of the documentation. I get bored, sick, and absolutely reading through documentation, especially stuff like that, which is really technical, and it's not even technical. It's complicated for being complicated sake, as almost. So anyway, we persevered with that, and in 2022 we got awarded it, no questions, no issues, to the point they had to raise a minor finding an opportunity to a finding, just so they didn't look like there'd been favoritism, because we'd literally crossed every T, dotted every I, and it was bang on. And the guy was like, yeah, I'm gonna have to just kind of change that to this level to say that you've got something. During that time, I didn't probably look at much chance of developing the business, because I was so involved in being in the business. And it's quite a daunting concept to start having to slow down and go, hang on a minute, let's look where we're going here, rather than just keep churning it away and getting the money through the door.
I mean, how important has a transition that been for you in terms of working on the business, not in the business? Because that's a big step change that people need to make, but don't always do it.
Yeah, it's a funny one for me, because I've never wanted anybody to say I'm a slacker. And whilst I think any responsible business owner needs to be seen to be a grafter, especially when you're in a small business, because the culture you create in that business is going to revolve around your work ethic. And it's difficult, because when I'm now a part of a business club, and obviously once a month we meet. We've got a business advisor, and I'm sure if I hadn't explained clearly to the guys why I was doing this, they'd have just thought I was off on a jolly for a day. Sitting in a nice hotel, or here, they're getting fed this and fed that. Because then we're going for a meal afterwards, and I'm sure they could have well thought it was just a nice break. So I think the biggest challenge there has been was guilt.
Mindset, isn't it?
It's not doing it all the time. And whilst the guys we've got are brilliant, I trust them implicitly, it's still that element of I've got to hand over some of this responsibility to somebody else here, because I can't always be in the business. And so I've had to go from being a sort of a work on the floor as well as in the office, to more office based, to going out to see clients. Whereas before, our business kind of came to us. We didn't have to go out and look for it, which was great, because it meant it kept me in my comfort zone. Having to work on the business has took me out of it. And going out and having to meet clients and sort of find the new opportunities. I'm not a natural salesperson. I'm an engineer.
I was going to say how you found that transition, because, like you say, you did what you did because you enjoy engineering, and then day after day after day, it just transpired. Now here you are. Have you sort of taken some time to reflect and say, am I an engineer now, or am I a business owner and a leader of people? Do you know what I mean? That doesn't happen overnight, does it? But it's something sometimes important to reflect on, and you will have changed, I imagine, who you are as a person.
Yeah, it's weird the way the change it does come.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm quite an introvert. I'm the guy that will sit in the corner of the party with a drink and just be more than happy with my own company.
Yeah.
But I've had to realize that in order to evolve as a business owner, I can't be that person.
Uh-huh.
I've got to be the person that goes to networking events and goes up to people, whereas before I'm like, do you want to do that?
Yeah.
And it's the same with the moving roles within the business. You've got to consciously make that change, because without it, I would go back on a safety net of going back into the CAD and doing the CAD and being immersed in that, rather than trying to train the next generation up.
Yeah. Go on, mate, sorry.
I was going to say, whilst I'm juggling lots of hats at the minute, I am slowly trying to pass them across, because I know that if we want to get the business where we want to get it, I can't be the person that's in that all the time. I've got to be the person that's, I don't want to use the word schmoozing, but getting the work and making the relationships. Yeah. Because getting work these days, it's not just a case of, can I give you a price for that? Yes, the price is important, but you've got to build that relationship. And people buy from people. And you're only going to generally buy from people that you like.
Yeah.
Unless there's a really convincing argument for dealing with somebody who you think's a bit of a dick.
Apologies for interrupting this podcast for a very quick 30-second pitch of my business. Theo James are a specialist manufacturing and engineering recruitment search firm based in Seaham in the Northeast. If you're looking for any staff or a new opportunity yourself, from a semi-skilled level right the way up to C-suite executive, then please get in touch. We have a specialist consultant in each discipline ready to help. I'm extremely proud of what we've built over the years, and I'd love to extend that service out to you. Thank you. Enjoy the podcast. Yeah, 100%. And you know what? I resonate with every single thing you've said there, because I'm exactly the same. I went through, and I still do, go for the guilt sometimes when I'm on networking events, I'm on courses, and they're on the front line, because you get used to leading from the front, don't you? Your business is you are the business, and you lead from the front and you show people what to do. And then suddenly you get to a stage where you've hired some staff, and then suddenly your job changes and you need to almost lead from the back. And it's tricky. It's such a tricky thing to do. And I'm exactly the same with networking. I do it now and it doesn't come naturally, but you almost have to force yourself into doing that. And then I think over a time of doing it once you've done it for 10, 12, 14 times, I don't know, you suddenly start to enjoy it a little bit. I think confidence is a weird thing, isn't it? I think confidence for me is something that I lack experience in, and so I've done it enough, and I can tell my brain, actually, I'm good at this, so I can do it. It's difficult, isn't it? It's I have so I'm part of a few groups, and one of it is a mastermind, and we had a great course of the week, and a guy called Andrew Silito, and he basically says that he's created a character, and he's created a character who he wants to be at work, and they're still aligned with his values. You know, he doesn't want to be an arsehole, but he makes whatever he calls him, makes better decisions. He makes stronger decisions, which are fair, but they're good for the business. They're not based around ego, or they're not based around people pleasing. And I took a lot from that, because I think you've got to wear many hats as a business owner or a manager. And sometimes the best decisions are the ones which are fair, but you know what, they might piss someone off, but ultimately if it's the right decision for them, for you and the business, it's got to be made. And that's a journey I'm on right now, I would say, trying to almost not be someone I'm not, but be the person I want to be at work. And that might be a very different person, the person that comes home with the kids and plays with them. Do you know what I mean? It's tricky, but it's a tough gig at times, isn't it?
It is. And I can appreciate that 100%, because you have to make that conscious decision to be that different person.
Yeah.
Because if I remain the person that I've always been, A, you don't evolve, but B, how can I get the business where I want to get it? Because to get to the next stage of growth of the business isn't me sitting in the corner of the party. That's me going out and talking to people. And it comes from, I don't know, I suppose it comes from not wanting to be part of the group or being the center of attention, which no doubt some psychiatrists will have an absolute whale with. But you've got to consciously change. Yeah. If you allow it to happen naturally, sometimes it works fantastic. Other times you don't change enough, or you just stay where you are. Yeah,
I completely agree. Culturally, as a business, you obviously we talked about how you've involved everyone and the team. Is culture something you've had to work on? Because, like you say, you're in the day-to-day sometimes. Is that just evolved over time? You've got a culture, or have you proactively said, right, we need to improve, we need to change, we need to do this because this will improve how people feel about the business?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, I think culture's evolved to an extent, not almost like organically.
Yeah.
Because obviously it was myself, then it was Sam, the guy gives a hand, and it was my wife. And obviously my wife and I get on really well. We've been together now 30 years. But we all got on. Now, the only reason I employed Sam was because I got on with him.
Yeah.
He was very good at doing his job, don't get me wrong. But I think from a culture point of view, you've got to look at it from a point of, if they haven't got the skills, are they the right fit? And if they're the right fit, can you train those skills? If they've got the skills and they're not the right fit, they'll do the job perfectly well, but that's all they'll do. They're there for the job. They're not there for feeling valued. They just want to come in, and they're generally the people who are more sort of financially driven.
Yeah.
I mean, when Sam came in, I sat him down and I used the love language aspects, and he was talking about stuff, and I was talking about wages. What sort of wages do you expect if I was to offer you a full-time position? And we talked through it, and I said, are you money driven? Yeah. And I went, are you? I said, there's nothing wrong with you if you are, but do you understand the other aspects? And I took him through it, and he was sort of like, wow, yeah, I hadn't thought about it that way. And whilst we like to think we reward all our employees well, they've got to feel valued within that, and you've got to talk. Like I said before, you've got to talk to them at the point where they value themselves, I suppose. And generally, when you try to identify it with somebody, it's how they treat you.
Yeah.
Because most people like to try and mirror. But from a culture point of view, I think having had the business beforehand, where we had sort of 3-4 guys in total, I made a lot of mistakes in that business. And I had a lot of success in that business. And that's certainly been instrumental in teaching me, I suppose, how to become that leader I needed to be.
Yeah.
Obviously, mirroring my father, my father was a chartered manager. He was very much an old school type boss.
Yeah.
And we clashed regularly. And I love him a bit. He now lives in France, which is not so much to call. He's easy to call on him when I need a hand, of course. But I've now got to a point where I don't need his hand anymore, because the lessons I learned have set me up for this job.
Yeah.
The reason we've got a business coach in a business club is because we, as business owners, got to the point where, how can we develop ourselves further? Mm-hmm. And because I'm kind of the front face, as it were, it was decided that I'll be the one that went and did this, because I'm the one that needs to change. Lindsay's great. She goes to a party and she talks to anybody.
Yeah. Yeah. Naturally.
Yeah. And originally I used to kind of hide behind her. Mm-hmm. And then eventually she went, I'm not going to networking events anymore with you, because I do all the talking. You can go yourself. Uh-huh. And that was a weird feeling. It was almost like, I don't belong here. It's a bit funny. But now, I'm not going to say I enjoy going to networking events. I do it. But with regards to the culture aspect, I keep going off track as well.
That's good.
I think if you can get culture to evolve organically, it's beneficial, and I think it's easier when the company's small.
Yeah.
Now, obviously, my roles changed slightly. I think part of the problem with the culture thing is any employee has to believe that the bosses are working just as hard as them. In my opinion, if they see people swanning off here and swanning off there, and they're never in there at the house in Florida and stuff, which don't get us wrong, I would love to be in that position. Mm-hmm. But you've got to prove that when you are there, you're grafting.
Yeah.
Otherwise, people just get why am I doing this when he's doing that? They don't see the journey you've been through.
Yeah.
And I think that's harder when you bring new people into the business, because if they've been with you from the start, they've seen it. Mm-hmm. But when new people come in, it's very easy to miscommunicate that culture.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you will undoubtedly get people in who you think are perfect fit, and then you go, well, they're kind of not.
Yeah.
You can only hope that they leave of their own accord. Mm-hmm. If they're not the right fit, because obviously the other side of trying to get rid of someone is a nightmare.
For a small business, when you're trying to grow, and you're trying to keep staff, train staff, and also try and attract staff, how challenging that, and what have you had to do? Because there's a massive, in manufacturing engineering now, there's a massive skill shortage, and people are in demand, and there's salaries have gone through the roof, and benefits have have improved for a lot of companies, which is a challenge in itself to try and compete, even to keep your staff. Have you thought about that, and have you done anything differently as a company, even to the way that you hire, the way you look at skills? You talked about skills there, and maybe culture over attitude over skill set type stuff. So what would you say if you're going to hire tomorrow? How would you do it? What's important for you, do you think?
I think that you've got to hire on attitude.
Yeah.
And I get the fact that people go to work because they want paid. That's the bottom line. You wouldn't go if you weren't getting paid.
Yep.
But at the same time, I think the journey kind of thing from an employee's point of view has changed slightly, because whilst they want to be handsomely rewarded, they want to feel part of it.
Yeah.
I'm not convinced about the working from home aspect, which I know a lot of people will disagree with. For two aspects, I don't think you can build that culture easily when somebody's working from home. But likewise, I suppose it's the same back over. They can't feel that value. They are literally just working for a wage at that point.
Yeah.
They're not going to feel the value until they start interacting with people within the business. And I'm not saying I'm against it entirely, but I think a hybrid model would probably work a lot better, certainly from our perspective.
Yeah.
But I mean, I know my sister-in-law works predominantly from home, and she's in the office maybe 1 day a week, 1 day a fortnight. But her job is a very sort of isolated job. For us to grow the business, we can't do that by having it remote.
Yeah. And I think you see more businesses now reverse back into it because they're seeing the negative side long term for people working. I'm exactly the same with you. I think flexibility is great, and I think it's given a certain type of person, certain types of role, ways where they can grow and develop. But I think as a business, if you look at culture, if you look at most businesses where you need people to collaborate, I think it's a nightmare. I think it's an absolute nightmare. I really do.
Yeah, and in the fabrication industry, most of it's about collaboration.
Yeah.
I mean, we're fabrication and engineering, so that's even more complicated from a collaboration point of view.
Yeah.
And whether you are collaborating internally or externally with suppliers and customers, you've got to have that personal interaction. Yeah. Video calls, again, fantastic, but I still think they're lacking something. Yeah, they're kind of like a bridge between the two, really.
Yeah, it's much more transactional, isn't it? I completely agree. I really do. In regard to, you've obviously been through so many challenges of growing this business in your last one, and working through recessions, working through COVID, which was a real difficult scenario. Where we are now, we're not out of the woods, are we? In terms of manufacturing, it's still got its challenges. What are the big ones for you, would you say, now over the last sort of 12 months that you've seen rear the head, which is having a challenge for the business?
We've sort of taken quite a big decision to, I suppose, kind of realign ourselves with where our direction that we want to go in. Okay. And unfortunately, whilst some businesses can realign and diverge straight away, I think as a small business, you've only got a certain amount of sort of, I suppose, opportunities in front of you, and you've got to kind of go, right, if we're going to realign here, we need to just stop for a minute, change our direction, and then we'll just go from there. Yeah. Our biggest challenge has been mainly, I suppose, trying to find new clients. Okay. The ones that we have dealt with in the past, and we're still dealing with them, they're absolutely great. But what we've got certainly with the Land Rover side of it, which is becoming less of a main player within our business, is that the products we used to manufacture for them, or still manufacture most of them, are that dwindling products. Mm-hmm. The latest vehicle we manufacture something for now is a 2016 model. Yeah. So by the nature of vehicles lasting, that's going to be dying at some point. We're not manufacturing anything for the newer stuff, but whilst that's good because it's repeat sort of small volume production and fabrication, the direction is being trying to find the next replacement for that, or trying to find the expansion for that. Yeah. Now, utility sector, for example, they obviously use an awful lot of metal. Okay. Especially the electricity side of it. The overhead lines use a lot, and that's a market we're trying to get into more. Yeah. We've got a foot in the door with it, but it's very much it's not a case of you can do really well from it and then get more work. it's very much based on, do you fit the criteria? Do you meet the new criteria? Do you fit the price model?
Yeah.
And we got a bit of a shock when looking at the utility sector because we'd never done tendering before.
Okay, right.
So that's been a challenge, as the tendering aspect.
Yeah.
And like I say, at the time, realigning where the business is going and trying to find those new clientele, because the utilities is great. That, but I always envision it as that being one finger to the hand of the business, as it were.
Mm-hmm.
And the offshore sector is something we're exploring more because obviously the offshore wind is massive.
Yeah, huge.
Northeast plays a big part in that.
Yeah.
But again, because our strength is small to medium volume manufacturing as a bread and butter side of the business, trying to get that repeat product is more difficult. So it tends to be smaller batch runs.
Mm-hmm.
Now, the other side of the business, I suppose, is more the project engineering, the sort of the bespoke aspect. And again, it's just because of the fact that we haven't been around terribly long, people don't know our name.
Just building the name. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Everyone we've dealt with has come back to us. We haven't had one client which hasn't come back,
Nice.
which is quite a good accolade. But still, trying to get the word out there has been more difficult. And we've got a marketing manager who does the marketing, but obviously the biggest chink in her armor is me, because I need to communicate regularly to her, and I'm still involved in doing this and doing this and getting that done and speaking to him and speaking to that, and I go, oh, Christ, I haven't spoken to her for a while. But she is remote, which is more hybrid, I suppose. So she tends to work with her house a bit and then comes in here once every fortnight or when I ring her.
Companies coming, to have the record for companies coming back to you every time. I think, that's brilliant. That is rare. Why do you think that is? What do you say in terms of why they've come back time after time?
I'm going to say quality is the first thing. Now, the problem with quality is it's very subjective, because what our class as quality isn't necessarily what you class as quality. You've only got to look at a used car to figure that one out.
Yeah.
But we're very particular about the standard at which things are made to the point where we've actually had to look at stuff sometimes and go, are we over processing this?
Okay.
Is this what the client wants, or are we just doing work for the sake of the fact that we want it to look pretty? The client's not bothered about that because it's not going to be seen. I think the other aspect is communication, because if you, and I learned this from the Land Rover game, is the fact if you keep the client informed at every step of sort of major news, I'm not talking about today we've drilled an extra hole here, then they feel included and they feel that they've got a lot more confidence about it. But it's mainly the fact that when a job does go wrong, and let's face it, they will, because that's the nature of things. If you get on the phone straight away and say, look, we've just had an issue with this, just let you know this is a solution we've found, or you're comfortable with tweaking the idea, the concept slightly to do that. As long as you communicate to them, I don't think that's an issue. It's when people don't do that and the client comes pick it up and goes, what the hell's that? I had to change it slightly. Well, what point are you going to tell me that? I know that because we've had that from our customers. And that falls firmly within, I think there's probably a big issue within industry from a reliable supply chain. And I can't remember who it was. Recently, I was talking to somebody who was much higher up in the sort of the supply chain than we are. And they've got major issues with the supply chain and reliability.
I think it's ever been more complicated and more challenging, I would say, for most companies now. It's huge. And I guess the advantage you've got now is because you can be agile, can't you? You can be small, you can be agile, you can look after clients. They're not numbers for you. It's important. So which is probably case in point why they come back, because you've looked after them and you've worked hard to retain them, where a lot of companies, they can probably afford a little bit of lack of quality here and there and to shed off some clients, which is a massive advantage, I guess, that the fact you're in that stage now, which is great. And look, you come across some David who you come across as a grafter, as someone who cares, who works hard, who I imagine people in the business can see that day in, day out. And you know what that is, and I get that completely, because it's then becomes a challenge of when I need to grow the business, my role needs to be different. How do I keep that level of respect from the staff? Do you know that's almost the next step, isn't it, for you?
I think the next step is going to be the biggest step you've also got is how to grow the business without compromising your financial stability.
100%. Because more people doesn't always mean more money.
It definitely means more headaches.
More
That's
headaches,
what it means.
more people, more problems. Yeah.
Yeah. And I think there's probably a point where you can get to whilst it's still manageable just by having a sort of a smallish team. But once it sort of reaches that, that's when you've got to start putting other managers in to manage certain departments, and that's when that evolves to. And it's trying to maintain that as well, because whilst I can always be the guy at the top, I always want anybody to be able to say to me, Dave, you got 5 minutes.
Yeah, you'd be there.
And if I haven't right then, obviously I'll make time for them. But I want that kind of, I suppose, familiarity within the business, and that kind of friendliness and jovialness within the business, while still appreciating the hierarchical structure.
Yeah.
But as soon as you bring obviously anybody else in, whether it's a worker, a manager, anybody, they can disrupt that.
Yeah.
And that's going to be the hard part, is trying to maintain that overall sort of feeling of, I'm not going to use family because it's massively overused. But
it is though, isn't it? Oh, but it is. Yeah.
When you think about, and you spend so much time at work, you should be enjoying it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like the fact you mentioned before when you interview and you ask them about their motivations financially, but that's a big part of it, because you're right in asking the question, what does motivate them? Because it could be a great motivator by someone coming in, say, look, in 5 years' time, you could be managing this team, the business, whatever it is, because and that's the age-old argument of, do you bring in experience or do you teach it? I'm very much the latter. Whether that's the right or wrong to be seen, but I think I'm similar to you in the sense that I want to build a culture, and I wanted to try and build a culture where people know they can progress organically in the business and they can be part of something, rather than just plunge someone in, he's your manager. It's a very different feel, isn't it? Difficult.
It is, and we've always said to the guys here, because at the minute we still get paid the least of everybody we employ, of course, in typical fashion that you do.
That's it.
We said, look, if we can get the business where we want to get it to, and it'll grow accordingly, then as the business does well, so will you guys. Because we generally give pay rises ahead of any pressure to do so, because of the fact we respect and value the people who we've got, and say, well, I mean, obviously cost of living in the last year has been a massive issue. So we've sort of gone to them and said, right, okay, well, we're going to give you this. Bloody hell, mate. Thanks very much. I wasn't going to ask, because I'm already getting a decent wage, but I wasn't going to ask. Well, but you've got to feel valued. And obviously that's the first thing that annoys people or makes people start looking elsewhere, is going to be not feeling valued. The second one is money. Quite often they'll use money as an argument for why they're not feeling valued, though.
Yeah.
And I suppose part of the problem from a small business point of view is justifying that cost increase, because whichever way you look at it, it's a cost increase. If a big company, it can get swallowed up. It doesn't really get noticed if one person gets it here and there.
Yeah. And
this might sound horrible, I don't know. I'm not for a blanket wage increase, unless it's required, such as cost of living or something. I'm for giving people rewards for doing well.
Yeah, I agree. Otherwise, it's lost, isn't it? It's lost in translation. They were just do payroll, which is fine. That I appreciate that. But you're right. People, it's because completely comes back to motivations and why people want to work in your business. But they will feel valued for you seeing them, noticing them.
It was weird because the first day I employed Sam, he'd been working at another company nearby, and whilst he actually came here for slightly less money, but he said, "I love working here." He says, I'm not feeling valued the other place. And I went, okay, mate, it's your choice. And we obviously been through the conversation about the love languages and what's your driver.
Yeah.
And he's went out the door, just went, hey, thanks for your help today, mate. It's been really appreciated.
Yeah.
And he stopped and he went, I've never had anybody say that to me. And I'm like, really? Well, you have. You've come in, you've worked. I'm happy with your work. Why wouldn't I say thanks? And every single day, I just say it as it's not to sound flippant, this, but it's almost like a natural reaction. Hey, thanks so much, guys. See you tomorrow.
Yeah, appreciate it.
Yeah, they feel included.
Yeah.
And even down, I mean, we need to get some new tires on the van, and I know it's very minimal because obviously there's a lot more important things to discuss in the business, and we do with certain clientele. But I said this in the guys, what tires do you think we should get?
Yeah.
Oh, what about this? And what about this? And what about that? And as it happens, I did what I wanted to do in any case and bought the ones I wanted. But that
But they were
consultation,
involved. Yeah,
they were
yeah.
involved, yeah. And
Yeah.
I explained why, and they went, "Oh, yeah, that's a good point. I hadn't
Yeah.
thought about that one."
Uh-huh. But there's a difference of you just doing it than asking their opinion,
Yeah,
which matters, isn't it?
yeah. But at the same time, I'm also open to the point if they had suggested saying, I went, "Yeah, I hadn't thought of them. That's a good idea."
Yeah.
Um, I don't want to be the smartest person in this business. I don't think I am now, but I think you've got to employ people who are going to be smarter at certain aspects than you are. Otherwise, what's the point?
Yeah, 100%.
Because eventually we want to get to the point where we can take longer holidays and know the business is getting run properly.
Yeah,
And you can't do that for people who are
exactly. It's that weird. It's that weird going through that period of time where almost wanting and needing to be the most important person in the business, then actually going through I now don't want to be, because the connotation of that is I'm needed so much that I can't step away, and there's pressures to that. It's difficult. So it feels you've made that switch, and I think a lot of people need to. I love that. Amazing. So I got some quick fire questions. Some of these I think we've probably already answered. What are 3 things that make up a good leader? 3 words, 3 things, anything that comes to mind?
I think you've got to have mutual respect for each other. Obviously, employer and employee, sorry. I think you've got to have a contagious drive. So you've got to be able to sort of communicate what the drive within the business and get people on board with the way you're going. And even when things aren't going quite well, you can't show that on the outside. Otherwise, people get concerned, unless you've got a major concern. But I mean, we've had ups and downs as anybody does. But I know for a fact that because I know what's coming, I'm not concerned about those ups and those downs. I know the opposite to follow. But I think quite easily, if you start showing that on the outside, people can get disparaged, and that's when people maybe start looking, shit, should I jump ship here before I get pushed?
Yeah.
And I think you've also got to have the inclusive culture, especially when you come to a job. And if it's done really well, everyone wins, but you've got to single out the guys who've made it happen and say, hey, thanks so much. Good job. And when things don't go quite well, unless somebody's made a major bollock, it's got to be okay. Right, okay, this has happened. How can we stop this from happening again? If it's an individual who's made an error, you've got to look from a point of have we given enough training? How can we help you to learn how to do that better, rather than you've done this, you've done that, and just the blame. I think the problem with the business owner is the fact that when it's doing well, everybody should be saying, yeah, we've done well, I'm really happy, we've got this, we've got that. When something goes wrong, you've got to take the blame.
Yeah, 100%.
And there's going to be elements where there's going to be let's look at it further. It's ultimately your responsibility if something's not right.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I know. I completely agree. Nice. What's more important to you, an academic route or on-the-job learning? Take yourself back to those days where you were in that room.
I think both have got a part to play.
Yeah.
And I mean, we had a guy here a while ago, actually part of the Kickstart scheme, and he'd been he was a degree qualified engineering graduate, and brought him in as a trainee welder at the time. And that's what we were looking for. He applied and he got the job. And I said to him, if you can learn the welding aspect and the manufacturing aspect and get the hands-on experience, you'd be far better as an engineer.
Mm-hmm.
So whilst you've got the academic ability to sort of be that engineer and be sort of the guy designing stuff or manufacturing or controlling stuff, you've got to have the understanding of what the requirements or what the sort of, I suppose, issues are around what you do. Because I see so many people who don't have the hands-on learning aspect, who are very academic and don't appreciate the two sides. And likewise, when you're on the bottom, you're going, well, why doesn't he just do this?
Yeah.
Why is that made that way?
Mm-hmm.
So they both got benefits. Just like you've got to have management, you've got to have workers, otherwise you haven't got a business.
Yeah, completely. But like I say, and I think a team to have both and have both those backgrounds is beneficial. I think if you can do that, I completely agree. Yeah. Can you recommend has there ever been any business books or books that have ever changed the game for you in anything? might be some business, it might not be businesses, it might just be anything that's had an impact on you.
I think the biggest one I can think of was Simon Sinek with Why.
Yeah, great book.
Because I think probably until I listened to it on Audible.
Yeah,
Actually, probably before Audible because I bought the CD.
Mm-hmm.
But that to me was I knew why I did it, but I didn't. I knew. Did I know? I don't think I knew why I did it. I just did it because I wanted to, but I didn't look back at it. And because a business essentially is an extension of you and your drive, once you can articulate that, that's far easier to get people on board.
Yeah.
So yeah, I'll probably say that it's not exactly latest, but it's
a great book. It's one of the best books I've ever read. I completely agree. I think it's one of those which not only every business owner, but every manager or just whoever. It's a book for anyone, isn't it? I think it can help your own.
I think so because even if you can understand what drives you in your normal personal life.
Yeah, exactly that. Exactly,
it's massively beneficial.
Yeah, 100%. How do we improve the future? If you had a magic wand, how do we improve the future of manufacturing and engineering, would you say, given its challenges right now?
Probably start my own steel mill.
Yeah.
Obviously, IT and AI are coming to play a massive part in things. How that's going to evolve, I don't know, because to an extent, it's kind of scary at the same time.
It is.
I think the problem you're going to have from a workforce point of view is eventually, just like machines have already done, is AI are going to remove an element of the workforce requirement. And the problem with that is obviously, I suppose the benefit is you're going to get less issues, but you're going to have less interaction. You're going to have a very automated system, and generally in manufacturing, everyone seems to go across the board with automated because let's face it, machines will run 24.
Yeah.
Whereas people don't. But you've then got to have, I suppose, people on board who understand that, but maybe don't get the journey.
Yeah.
So it's trying to get that balance. But I think the biggest issue we've got in the minute from a manufacturing point of view is going to be those people. Because until that comes about, and I'm not sure I want to do that. I think there's going to be an element of both. But it's always going to be the challenge on employment.
Yep, completely agree.
But in a magic wand, if I had a magic wand today, I'd probably wave it and be living in France after selling the business. But that's not really helping the challenges to the engineering sector.
But it's nice to have that motivation and that end game, isn't it? I think that's important as well. Why you're doing it, because you know what, it's hard on a business, isn't it? And quite rightly said, what people don't realise, often you're the worst paid, often you're the hardest worker, often you're the one who doesn't get the kudos. But at the same time, there must be something that keeps us doing it. There must be something that keeps us there and progressing, because it is challenging, but it is a great thing to be part of building a business, isn't it? It's a privilege.
Yeah, it is. And without a doubt, it's probably one of the biggest challenges you'll ever have in your life. And I'm not going to lie and say there hasn't been times when I've thought, should I just pack this in and go work for somebody?
Yep.
But that's usually been when, I suppose, the chips have been down and you're kind of in the hole and you're thinking, do I need this?
Yeah.
But when things go well, you're like, I'm really quite chuffed here.
Yeah. It's that roller coaster, 100%. And plans for Black Hills Products now, the next 12 to 18 months, what's on the agenda? What's the plans?
The plans mainly are just to sort of try and expand the current offering we've got, and to communicate that information better as to what we do. Again, because of the sectors we're trying to get into are very sort of niche. There's certain people in that sector which you've got to know who the right people to speak to. You've got to know the right place to be. Whether it's physically or online from a tendering portal point of view, because trying to get information out of people is like getting blood out of a stone. And I had a fairly audacious plan when I started to double the growth every year. And for the first 3 years it did.
Right.
When we did ISO, it stagnated because we had to put a lot of money into the just getting the place ship, as well as obviously detracting from the drive behind growing the business. Because it was just like a huge energy vampire. It sapped the energy out of you. So, I mean, I'm 48 next week. I've got maybe another 10 years, I think, ish. So I want to get the business to a point whereby I can start taken an element of retirement and know that I've passed it off to people.
Yep.
Then they can run it in line with our ethos.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way to do that is by investing in the right people.
Yeah.
Investing in the right people, getting the right my contracts on board. And I'm absolutely convinced we'll get there, because it's just a case of getting in front of the right people who can still see the value in your business.
Yeah.
Because whilst price is still a major contender, and it isn't in some markets where price is the king still, nobody wants to be a busy fool.
Yep.
So it's just trying to get that balance between making the right profit to allow you to reinvest. Because that's what, let's face it, when as business owners, when we take less money than everybody else, it's because we want to reinvest in the business.
Yeah, certainly, it's long game.
If it's a growing business.
Yeah.
And when we've recently looked at hiring an extra yard, because one of the jobs we're looking at for Northern Power Grid is we're going to need to store stock to supply to them. So it's just trying to get those tenders in place and getting our feet in the door with these places. And just a couple of tenders would massively grow the business.
Yeah. Well, I've got no doubt that will happen, mate, because your passion. I've really enjoyed it. And I think I always have takeaways from every episode. And I think for me, and it's always a gamble who I have on in terms of what their mindset's going to be. But I resonate with so much stuff you said about the right way or the right intentions to manage people and to involve them. You know what? It's so on point where people need to be right now in terms of where the society is changing and the new workforce are changing, where they want purpose, they want to be involved in decisions, they want to have a voice, they don't want to be spoken to like crap. Do you know what I mean? Like they want to be part of something which has some value, and I think you embody that massively. And I think it's created the business, and I think a lot of businesses aren't like that because they've never been like that. And I think changing a culture of a firm that's been there 100 years is challenging, and it's easier for small business. But at the same time, anyone listening who is part of a business, but they are a manager and they are manager people, they can change their team of 2, team of 3. That things can kick on from there. It's just the way you work with people and speak to people. So look, thanks, Dave. This has been superb. I've really appreciated it. It's been great.
All right, thank you very much. Appreciate it.